Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hi, Audrey. Welcome, everyone, to Beyond Aesthetics, the Business of Beauty. We have today a very special guest, and I'll tell you more about her in just a little bit. But I'd like to let you know that Beyond Aesthetics, the Business of Beauty connects aesthetic providers with expertise, information, and resources to improve and scale their practices. Today, we're so pleased to host a very knowledgeable and greatly respected expert in the aesthetics arena. Audrey Neff currently serves as the Director of Marketing for PatientNow, which provides practice management solutions for over 5,000 aesthetics practices and businesses worldwide. Audrey brings over a decade of experience in sales and marketing, 9 years of which has been in the medical aesthetics vertical. She's a frequent industry speaker on practice development, a published peer review author, host of True to Form podcast, and has held faculty positions for more than 25 medical associations. Audrey's a popular speaker at conferences across the globe. Today, Audrey will be talking with us about a market segment that is underrepresented in the aesthetics industry, millennials. Today, we'll pull back the curtains on this generation of individuals whose commanding buying power should not be ignored. Dialing into millennials' goals and objectives can dramatically increase revenue for aesthetics practices and businesses while serving a generation loyal to brands. Audrey, it's indeed a terrific pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you out of your very, very busy schedule. You just got off a plane and you've landed. You're now in Las Vegas at yet another conference. Which conference is this that you're going to be speaking at?
Yes. First of all, I want to apologize. You look phenomenal, Nell, and I'm over here in like a Nike sweatshirt, no makeup. I'm here for the AAFPRS annual meeting I speak at every year. So it's the American Academy of Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery. So it's a great conference and it's in Vegas. Thank you. I appreciate trying to make it as fun.
It's a great way to be. It keeps us all young inside and outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Young inside's a good thing.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you to be Audrey Neff?
Yeah, totally. So I'll keep it pretty high level, but I've been in the industry, the medical aesthetic industry, for going on almost 9 years now. So almost at the decade benchmark, which is really exciting. It's an industry I've become immensely passionate about. I've poured blood, sweat, and tears into just educating this industry on industry best practices, particularly when it does come to the millennial demographic, which I know is what we're going to talk about today, which is something I am so passionate about because it was a huge gap I saw in the industry early on that I really made a lot of moves to fill because I knew it was a demographic that we couldn't ignore, and a lot of people weren't talking about the millennial demographic. So yeah, currently, as you said, I'm the director of marketing for the PatientNow portfolio. We are a private equity backed portfolio company. We own multiple different brands. We serve around 5,000 practices globally, and resources and energy to speaking and educating around the industry, which is really what fuels my fire at the end of the day. So I am super excited. I know this is kind of impromptu, but I am one of those people. I'm like, if you ask me to do something, I'm always like, sure, just tell me when and where, and I will be there. So,
and I'm so lucky that you did take my invitation. You accepted my invitation because this is such a treat. The kind of person you are, I can tell through and through. So fantastic. So let's see. There's going to be a little. People would like to get a hold of you. I have all the contact information.
Sure. So anyone can email me. It's aneff, ANEFF at patientnow.com. I'm not going to give out my mobile number on a public platform, which I've made the mistake of doing before. But I'm very responsive to email, very active on LinkedIn and Instagram. Those are kind of my two social media platforms that I use for business. So anyone can get a hold of me on those or email me directly as well. Like I said, at aneff@patientnow.com.
And indeed, my gosh, what a generous offer too, because Audrey is such a resource. Very much so. All right. So where would you like to begin, Audrey?
Yeah. So I guess if I go back several years, when I first started my public speaking career, probably around 6 or maybe 7 years ago now in the industry, I was actually kind of what fueled all of this. I was speaking at a conference in Miami at the time, and there was a speaker who was speaking ahead of me. I will not name a name of who she was because she's an incredible person I have a lot of respect for. But at the time, she had actually gotten up and she gave this whole lecture on why practices, so this is 7 years ago, let's say, should avoid millennials. You shouldn't pay attention to them. They're poor. They're not brand loyal, all these things. And I remember myself sitting in the crowd, and I was the next speaker up. And I was thinking to myself, like, wow, I really disagree with that immensely, because I know myself, this also comes from myself. I'm a millennial aesthetic consumer myself. I started getting aesthetic treatments at age 22, and I'm right in the middle of the kind of millennial age gap, which is now 27 to 42. It's a lot wider than a lot of people realize. And I just remember sitting there thinking, wow, I really disagree with this. And why is nobody talking about millennials? Like, everyone was just, the millennial demographic had the worst reputation, I feel like, in the industry, with all these negative stigmas. And I just remember sitting there, I'm like, I disagree with this. And ever since that day, I was like, I'm going to make it a mission to create some content and do my research and start pushing this out into the industry, that this is a demographic and a consumer market that practices cannot ignore. And so fast forward, several years later, I speak on various topics, probably like 15 different topics now, but millennials being my absolute top favorite to speak on. And I ended up eventually spending a lot of time writing a huge research paper that eventually was peer reviewed and published in the Plastic and Aesthetic Nursing Journal. So it's all backed by data of generational aesthetics, what consumer markets have market share, will their market share be decreasing, increasing? And bottom line of the story was that Gen X, which we all know has the majority of aesthetic market share in North America, let's say it's around 41%. And boomers has, I think, 30 something percent. However, those two, which were predominantly the two core constituencies of most aesthetic practices, their market share is decreasing. Like, it's not going to be increasing. It's already hit its top tier, and now it's going down. Millennials, while they don't have full market share yet, their market penetration is still only around 21%. They're the only demographic with full purchasing power expected to gain market share. So while boomers and Gen X have more market share than millennials, it's not going up, it's going down. Whereas millennials, while they have less market share at 21%, they're flowing into this industry at rapid rates. The average toxin user is coming in at a much younger rate, and they're going to be increasing market share. And when it comes to full purchasing power, millennials are the only demographic with full purchasing power expected to gain market share, because Gen Z does not have full purchasing power. And I'm seeing a lot of people try to talk about millennials and talk about Gen Z. Gen Z starts at age 10. 10-year-olds are not getting aesthetic treatments. Like, that everybody needs to focus their efforts on, because if you don't, you're going to be left in the dust 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And unlike the other generations, the millennial consumer group has a lot of unique nuances associated with them. And this is from me doing the research, doing the data, working with thousands of practices, but also just myself being a millennial aesthetic consumer as well. So I have a couple variations of the course I teach, but all in all, if we look at the market as a whole and like just market penetration, market saturation, all of these things, it's a very under-penetrated market overall, even if we put millennials aside. So when it comes to medical aesthetics, and I'm sure you're familiar with this data too, less than 10% of the total addressable market in aesthetics has even been tapped into in terms of just facial injectables. It's like 7.5%, which is so low. And people think that this market is saturated. I'm like, no, there's for all of us. Like, and that's why I dislike when people get hopped up on competition and things like that. Like, there's more than enough room for all of us to succeed. But at less than 10% market penetration, and with millennials, that consumer group being 27 to 42, being the only consumer group with full purchasing power expected to gain market share through 2027 and beyond, it's like, you can't ignore them. You have to have a strategy in place of how you're going to connect with them, build trust with them, and retain them in your practice forever.
Right, absolutely. Maybe, and then we can get into some of the tendencies and characteristic demographic. Before we get to that, could you explain for us what you mean by full purchasing power?
Of course. Yes. Great question too. So for full purchasing power would equate to you're basically off your parents' payload, let's say, and you're in the workforce. So you're responsible for your own income, let's say. So that's why when we talk about Gen Z, it's like a 10-year-old doesn't have full purchasing power. They're living off their parents, obviously. So there are some Gen Zs, the older ones. So let's say maybe like 22 to 26 probably has full purchasing power. Let's say they're out of school, they're on their own, they're not dependent on parents. that's what would equate to full purchasing power. So millennials, being that they're 27 to 42, that whole group has full purchasing power. And with age also comes more disposable income typically, right? So millennials have now kind of shifted. So now that they're a lot older than people think, like they're approaching, the younger side is even approaching 30 at 27. Next year, it'll be 28. They start at 28 years old. They're moving into their, perhaps depending, what they do for a living, their prime earning years as well. And with that just comes more money that they can start to spend on aesthetic treatments. And something else that is really cool and something to not get lost in is once millennials start getting aesthetic treatments, as any of us in the entire world who have ever gotten an aesthetic treatment before, we know what we look like when we stop getting them. Once we start, we're not stopping. Just like it is with hair, with nails, whatever it is, it has become a mainstream part of a millennial's beauty and health regimen. And once they start doing it, it's very hard to stop. So they will go the extra mile and budget for it if they are maybe not in a prime earning year yet, just because of the society that we live in now. And it's an exciting time too, because years and years ago, aesthetic treatments used to be like so hush hush. Like, oh, I don't want my neighbor to know I got Botox, whatever it may be, like with Gen X and boomers. And now it's like millennials want to shout it from the rooftops. I get Botox, lip filler, whatever it is, and social. So it's a very unique consumer group to deal with, but it's a very exciting consumer group to deal with at the same time, because they come with things that are very valuable for practices when it comes to marketing, social media, before and after photos. Millennials are typically okay being like, yeah, you can use my photos, it's okay. Whereas other generations are like, no, I don't want my photos like that. Okay. So they come with some nuances for sure, but they come with a lot of value as well, which I think some practices can sometimes oversee.
All right. Well, and there's a lot there. You packed a lot in the kind of intro into the world that you're in. We do have some slides. Would you like to?
Absolutely. Yes, I can see them. So this is some data. I love data. I love knowing what's going on in the industry. I typically start really any presentation I give in the industry, like lecture I give, and I give like 45 a year, always with data, because I think it's very, very important that all of us know where the industry is and where it's going. So long story short, medical aesthetics, it's a very exciting industry. It's still a niche industry. It's still small, but it's growing exponentially. And in 2022, as you guys can see on the screen, estimated $17.8 billion industry, and compound annual growth rate will be growing double digits if we want to go to the next slide. So it's a great time for this industry. So these are 4 reasons why the industry will continue to grow. Low market penetration, which I kind of already alluded to. So less than 10%. It's around 7.5% of the total addressable market in aesthetics has even had some type of injectable before. If I even go further than that, less than 1.25% have had some type of skin tightening treatment. So this just speaks volumes to the opportunity that is still wide open in this industry. Millennial opportunity and adoption is second. Obviously, that's what we're focusing on today. Continued innovation. I love this. This is one of the million reasons I love this industry, is because every single 6 months, I feel like something new is coming into the market. And obviously, if we're, Europe, I would say is probably like 5 years ahead of us in terms of innovation and getting things approved and into the market. I think the US is a little behind on that front. But regardless of that, like, we have so many different things coming in. Last year we just introduced a new toxin. There's going to be another new toxin coming in. So we have this continued innovation, whether it's injectables, whether it's regenerative medicine, whether it is energy-based devices, so much innovation, which is exciting. And then economic resiliency, I wanted to add here as well, because obviously there's a lot of talk around macroeconomic factors. And on a positive note, I want to go back and kind of set the stage saying that, this industry was still an industry back in 2008 when we went through that entire, housing crisis. Oh, yes. And it made it through COVID. And it's made it through this last year as well, the last several years, right? So I don't want to say anything's recession proof. I don't like when people say that it's a recession proof industry, because that's very false, because it obviously falls on how someone's business protocols are in place, but it is a resilient industry. And with that note, there's a reason why we've kind of moved into this consolidation stage as well in the industry. We're seeing a lot of private equity and private investment groups coming in, doing roll-ups, acquiring practices. We have so many phenomenal franchises, de novo builds opening up around the country and expanding, which is very exciting. So all in all, it's an exciting time for the industry. These are just 4 reasons why the industry will continue to grow. Obviously, my passion lies with the millennial opportunity and adoption. So
second item there. Yes, absolutely. What's so exciting? So I guess we can go to the next slide then.
Just that.
Yes, yes.
My favorite thing in the whole world. Yep. We can go to the next one.
Okay.
So why millennials? So this is another slide I like to show kind of in my intro when I talk about them is for those of us and every single practice owner, I feel like we all have millennial consumers and we all have younger consumers entering into our practices. And we've probably already all noticed that the user of an aesthetic treatment is coming in at a much younger age. And it is because of the whole concept of prevention versus correction, right? It's much cheaper to prevent something than it is to correct something. So this falls more so on the younger cohort of millennials versus older, since in that case, it could be corrective in some way, which is great. Prevention is cheaper than correction. Hyper-focused on prejuvenation is the term the industry uses versus rejuvenation. Millennials spend $600 billion in the US each year. They also account for $500 billion in indirect spending through parents or guardians. I think this one's big because millennials are actually a super influential generation. And I don't think people give them enough credit for this. Millennials are highly influential in generations other than their own. So when it comes to millennials influencing their parents or someone or their grandparents, whatever it may be, like in my case, I influenced my mom to start getting aesthetic treatment. She started getting them a couple of years ago, laser, Botox, filler, all this stuff, biostimulatory. So millennials, they're just very influential because they're a part of this and it's very mainstream for them. So while they have direct spending, $600 billion, they account for indirect spending as well. So when it comes to thinking of what is the lifetime value of a millennial patient in my practice, it's not going to be what they spend with you only. It would also equate to referrals that they bring to your practice. So I think that's something else that a lot of us shouldn't lose sight of. And then wider social acceptance, we kind of touched on this. It's mainstream. It's normal. I wouldn't even think twice about saying, I'll be right there. I got to go get my Botox touch up, whatever it may be. It's just a normal thing. No one thinks twice about it. And it's a great thing for our industry as well, because now that the millennial generation that's how they think mentally with it, that's going to fall down to all the generations that come after them. So it's a really, really good thing for the industry that it's become so mainstream with millennials. That's going to fall right into line with Gen Z and then whatever is after Gen Z, I guess, not even born yet to 9 years old. So, but when they eventually enter it, will be even in a more exciting time with more innovative products and all these things, and it'll be a normal thing. So the industry is going nowhere but up. And then, of course, because they start earlier, they have a higher patient lifetime value. So they're just worth more because they start getting treatments at a younger age. So, going to my story, I started getting treatments at age 22. And if we take into account what a millennial could spend in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, I mean, that's tens of thousands of dollars. Honestly,
you're so excited. I feel your excitement. It's just
it's true though. And people think of it like, oh, they're just gonna come in for tox and filler and blah blah blah. But if you actually take a step back and calculate, okay, let's say I do a great job at my practice at getting them on comprehensive treatment plans. I have a membership program. I do all the things right in my practice. Let's calculate what they will spend over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It is so much money. And I think when you think of it like that long-term versus a single visit, it's kind of like something goes off, because it's very, very different. So losing a millennial opportunity, let's say over the phone, you didn't do the right job in the consult, whatever it is, it's not you lost $1,000, $500, whatever it is, you lost $50,000, let's say. If that was a millennial patient that was going to, because once they start, they're not going to stop getting treated for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So that's a big reason.
The results are positive. They like it. They don't want to do without. Plus all the innovation that you pointed out that's coming up. They're on top of it, aren't they? Fantastic. How about the next slide? Should we move on?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
So these were just some highlights from the research paper I did last year that was peer-reviewed and published. So the key things here, and I kind of touched on this, was So all in all, industry, and this might be a little bit higher now since this was published last year, but industry was growing at 14.9% compound annual growth rate, and it was estimated to be worth 22.5 billion by the end of 2025. Boomers, which we kind of touched on, so they currently held 24% of the market share last year, yet they're expected to decrease to 20% by 2025. Gen X accounted for 41%, so the majority, yet decreasing 37%. Millennials, here we go, accounted for 22%. It's only a fifth, but they're expected to increase to a third of the market just by 2025, which is what, like 2 years, not even 2 years from now. So long story short, this is why we have to pay attention to them, because if we don't, we're going to struggle and we're going to have problems. If we're throwing all our eggs in the basket of Gen X and boomers and we're not focusing on what millennials engage with, how they build trust with providers, how they choose providers, what they value, like their core values, all of these things. So that those are just kind of the highlights from the paper I did last year, which is very lengthy. I would never want anyone to read it.
You are proving you are a data person. You like
I am data.
Yes, data driven. Absolutely. Well, that's really exciting, and the fact that you are published, and in reviewed articles. So these are not articles
not made up. No, it's real.
They are real. They're totally credible. Okay, and then inside the medical aesthetic industry, that globally there's only 10% penetration.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like we said, less than 10%, which is why millennials, you got to pay attention to them.
Absolutely. And those who do are going to be reaping the benefits long term.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a really powerful message. Wow. Okay. And then here's your contact info. And it's also rolling across the bottom of the screen. Fabulous. Okay. That was fun.
Yeah.
That was fun. Tell us a little bit more. So what are the characteristics of millennials and what is the process of decision making that they go through?
Absolutely. So there's core 5 values that they hold, and it's connectivity. Like they have to connect. Like, how are you going to connect with them? They're humans. They want to connect with the humans. So that would go into, actually, I'll put a pin in that. So it's connectivity. Convenience is another one. So connectivity and convenience are the first two. Convenience just meaning they have unlimited access to content on their phones, on the internet. You have to be where they're searching. Next would be experiences. Millennials care about experiences, and they will pay more for a better experience, statistically wise. After that would be authenticity and relatability. So those are like the values that they hold that are ingrained in most millennials. So you have connectivity, you have convenience, you have experiences, authenticity, and relatability. So pulling those, absolutely. Those core 5 values, core 5. And then it goes into, so those are the 5 values. Okay. And then the course I teach are the core 4 strategies, which is an acronym. I believe this is the term that's called. So the C stands for, this is what I teach when I do this course, which is like an hour to 2 hours long.
This is valuable.
This is connectivity. So I go through, okay, how are you going to connect with them? And there are so many different avenues, and we'll stop on this really quickly. There are so many avenues you have to be present in if you want to connect with the modern millennial consumer. And social media is one of them, of course. But I think 2 that are so often neglected are before and after photos on your website and social, and your Google reviews. And we actually did, this is published in the peer-reviewed article I did. We did a survey with Google on the RX photo side of our business a couple of years ago, where we actually surveyed 1,000 millennial consumers who were researching aesthetic treatments online. And there was a whole data set we got from it. Long story short, one of the questions was, when you're on an aesthetic provider's website, what impacts you the most? And the top 2 responses were before and after photos was 1, and reviews was 2nd. And only were the provider's credentials, they were like in 4th or 5th place. So while credentials are important, training is important, clinical expertise is important, before and after photos and reviews are more important to the modern millennial consumer. And so often practices they put these on the back burner and they just don't think about them. And they're often very cheap fixes. Photos, just make sure you have a designated area in your practice or areas where you have consistent backgrounds, consistent lighting, tools, to help keep angles. I'm biased, but RX Photos, an app we own, and it ensures every angle is perfect every single time. You can never not have a perfect photo, a before and after photo, because there are basically angles, digital angles that match up every single sequence, whether it's side face, front face, breast, butt, lips, whatever it is. So from that perspective, if you have all these things in place, your photos need to reflect your work. If your photos don't reflect the work, how is a millennial consumer going to know that? Because you could be the best objector in the world and you got phenomenal results. But if your before and after photos don't reflect that, and I'm looking at your gallery and I'm like, it's so cheap fix, and it's something that impacts them a lot.
Yes. Wow. I think, it sounds like there's a lot of underestimation as to how important the before and after photos are. And even the minute detail of having the areas of the body or the face positioned exactly right. So you're comparing apples to apples. Same view of the same feature. So they can be direct comparison of the before and the after. So that's why it's so critical to have precise before and after photos. Positioned exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly. And backgrounds, just being mindful of everything, lighting, limiting variables of differences and things like that. And then reviews is the other thing. And because reviews is huge, like everybody reads reviews. If I ask any millennial consumer or anyone, regardless of age, do you read reviews? I'm going to go with everyone says yes. And when it comes to reviews, if we go to the Google side of things, it's usually where people go to research, right? Like it's over 93% go to Google. So when you're searching, because the majority of practices are going to be local businesses. So when a consumer is searching, they're searching for someone near them. Because of that, they're typically going to land on the practice's Google business profile before they go to the website. Like that's like almost the first stop, basically, to pass the smell test, if you will. And what are they going to look at? Reviews. If I saw a practice that had 5 reviews, 20 reviews, 50 reviews, and I'm thinking about going and spending $5,000 on a medical aesthetic treatment, no way am I going there. So reviews speak volumes. They build trust. They build credibility. They do so much more than I think a lot of medical providers realize. And I think that it's a mindset shift as well, because most of the providers in this industry came from, let's say, a non-cash pay vertical. And then they make a shift over to it's cash pay medicine. It's retail medicine. People don't need surgery. People don't need aesthetic treatments. It's cash. It's retail. And once you step into the world of retail, consumers have choices. And when they have choices, reviews play a critical role. And actually, if we want to go from like a statistic wise too, I think it's like 94% of millennials read reviews, which is a lot. And and I forget the stat around this one, it's high, it's in the 90s. They will avoid a practice due to 1 negative review. And so people, 1 negative review. And people freak out when I say this, but I'm like, it's okay. Like, let's break this down for a second. Is the stat from a leveling the playing field standpoint should be for every 1 negative review a practice gets, you need at least 17 positive to level the playing field. So, and everyone's going to get a negative review. Like millennials know that. I know that. I think if I saw a business that didn't have a negative review and they had 5.0 star average and 500 reviews, I'd be like, that's a little sketchy, like almost disingenuous. So human, everyone's going to get a negative review. And I think everybody knows that. It's just a matter of what your process is to combat those negative reviews, which is to just have a process in place, scalable process through technology and front desk training and internal process training of how we're going to consistently pump positive reviews of our happy patients who love us onto our Google business profile, so that when we do get that negative review, whether it's a difficult patient, whoever it is, it happens, it's not going to impact our bottom line.
Right. So in that case, if there were a negative review that was given, would it be a good idea for the medical aesthetic practice to reach out to? Yeah,
absolutely. I advise all reviews on Google should be responded to. So don't leave them unresponded. I would recommend having like a Google Doc, a template, like they can be canned responses, because something that people need to be mindful of is you cannot violate HIPAA. So even if a patient is writing a review and they are a patient, you as the provider, it's a public platform, you cannot acknowledge that they are a patient. So you just have to be very mindful of how you craft the response back. So if someone writes a negative review, you can't write, well, Audrey, you didn't follow the right pre and post treatment protocol and blah, blah, blah. Like, because now you just violated HIPAA and you just acknowledge that they were a patient. Instead, let's back up for a second. And that just looks emotional and crazy. If someone's researching and they're like, this provider's a little nutty, maybe I don't want to go there. Like, let's be professional. Let's be, let's take a step back. Let's handle this the right way. Let's not go nuts and write a response and then violate HIPAA. And then we look super just not professional. So instead, I would advise practices to just have some templated response. And perhaps it's like, thank you for your comment. We strive to provide the best possible care for all of our patients. Please contact us directly to discuss further. So you're not actually acknowledging they're a patient. You're being very vague with your response back, but it's coming from a professional manner. You're acknowledging it. You're not violating HIPAA. And so that's okay. So I would advise to respond to every review, positive or negative. You just got to keep that little HIPAA thing
right in mind. So it's a big deal to not acknowledge them as a patient.
Yes.
Is that maybe the rule that must not be broken at all?
Absolutely.
They could get slapped with
responses and go that route.
So for medical practice to get reviews, how would you recommend that they go about inviting their patients to review?
Definitely. There's two strategies I talk about. I call them brain and brawn. So brain would be having some type of technology in place. And there's plenty of systems out there that can do reputation management. We have one in our PatientNow portfolio that's integrated with our systems, but there's plenty of other ones out there. And the key here is technology scalable. It saves time, it increases efficiency, limits manual work from your employees. So I would advise just having some type of technology in place that can send out automated email and text review campaigns to the patients who love you, saying, hey, please leave us a review on Google, and it takes you right to Google. The thing I would also advise, though, is to make sure that whatever solution you choose, it can tailor based on the treatment received, because certain treatments you'd want to ask for a review at different times.
Oh, yes.
Surgery, different than you would want to ask someone who just came in for lip filler or toxin and they're a younger patient, right? The timeline is different. So, someone that just had surgery, you don't want to ask them for a review the next day when they're not feeling the best and maybe they leave you a horrible review because they're regretting their decision temporarily. So just making sure that whatever software you use can be tailored based on treatment avenue is what I would add. So that's one thing. The second thing would be to just have the internal training. And when are we going to ask for them? And what is the talk track? So let's say Susan had a phenomenal experience. She finished her 6-month treatment series. Her skin is glowing. She feels phenomenal. She's checking out. It's like, Susan, your skin looks amazing. Oh my gosh, it's been so wonderful to treat you. Just so you know, in the next, hour or two, you're going to be receiving an email and a text message from our practice asking you to review us on Google. As you can imagine, we're a small business. The lifeblood of our practice is the results we achieve for our patients. It would just mean the world to us if you would review us on Google. If practices just ask in a genuine and authentic way, and then you make it as easy as possible, and they get the text message, leave us a review on Google, and it's customized. As a millennial consumer, if I'm feeling great, and they already asked me in that kind, authentic way, and then I get a text message with the link to go review, I will do it 110%. So it's just a matter of having the processes and technology in place and just being genuine about it. And if you do all of those things, you will increase your Google reviews. And so many practices are like, people don't leave reviews. They'll never leave reviews. That is so false. I cannot tell you how many practices we have onboarded with this training, and they have went from like 3.8 stars on Google to 4.8. So it works. It just has to be a priority, and there has to be the training. There has to be the technology. Then, of course, you have to be providing the best experiences for your patients, which doesn't fall on us. That falls on the providers. If you do all those things together, I promise you will drive more reviews to your Google business profile. So it's kind of a combination approach.
And people sharing the great experience that they had at the practice and wanting to support the practice that now they've adopted and are loyal to. They're going to keep coming back, and they want their friends and family to join them in this great experience as well. Okay, fantastic. So you mentioned Google. Where does Yelp fit in here?
So Yelp is I feel like the word nobody wants to mention in this industry. We all despise Yelp. I wouldn't even worry about Yelp, to be honest. I've never talked to a business owner or practice owner provider that likes Yelp. It's like the evil platform nobody wants to deal with. And to be honest, with millennials, like I wouldn't even worry about Yelp. Google reviews is going to be where you need to focus on.
Where they're at anyway, doing their research.
Yelp's going to just annoy everybody no matter what for all of eternity. Google reviews is where you should focus your efforts on. Put Yelp on a Post-it note and put a pin in it and just forget about it. Because it's a very difficult platform to deal with. The majority of if we're talking about millennials, it's going to be your Google reviews is where you want to really focus your efforts.
It's trusted. It's a trusted.
Yeah, more trusted. I think most consumers know that Yelp is just not, like, to me, it's just not a trustworthy platform.
Maybe manipulation is handled in the background.
Restaurants, like I don't even trust Yelp for restaurants. Like I'll read OpenTable or something like that or Google, but I'm not. Yelp, I just don't even venture to. They've dug their own grave.
Yes. So an experience. So can you describe for us what an ideal experience looks like?
Yeah, definitely. Experiences are big. So my advice here would be millennials, as I mentioned earlier, they will pay more for a better experience. And I feel like that's opposite of what most people think about when they think of millennials. They think that they're very cheap and shop around and blah, blah, blah. Do they do their due diligence? Sure. But they value experiences, which goes hand in hand with a relationship. And those of us that are in this industry, we would all agree it is a relationship-driven industry. You cannot treat a millennial patient like a transaction. Make them feel like they are your friend and you love them and you care for them. Like there are so many little things that practices can do to just build relationships at a higher level. And everything is an extension of your brand, right? So the second a millennial walks into your practice, let's say, what does it feel like? Does it feel like a nice place? Does it feel like a luxurious place? Are they greeting people with first names? Are they offering them a beverage? Are they remembering their names when they come in? All of these little things, not making them sit out in the, I don't like the term waiting room, out in the client lounge area for too long. When they bring them back to the treatment room, when the provider goes in, do they remember little things about them? And they don't actually have to remember things about that patient. It could just be every time that patient comes in and because we all know, when you're there getting injections or whatever it is, you're talking about your life to your provider. It's just how it is. Like we just put in all this trust to whoever does our aesthetic treatments, nails, hair, same thing. And when they're talking about these things, take a little extra time out of the day, 20 seconds after you leave that room, go into the patient's chart and write down everything, right? So Susan is getting married. She's going through wedding planning. She just got a new puppy, whatever it is. And so when Susan comes back 3 months later, whether you remember her or not, you walk in that treatment room, you're like, oh my gosh, Susan, it is so great to see you. You give her a hug. How is the wedding planning? How is your puppy? Like these little things that take a little 20 seconds extra time, they go miles, and it just makes them feel like they matter. So I would say it's all about building a relationship and just taking the extra time to go the extra mile, even though it may only take an extra 10 seconds to just make them feel loved. And that really, really goes a long way.
It sure does. So picking people to work in a medical practice and a medical aesthetic spa is important to the people who are nurturing, are really great with other people, who are caring. Those are the kind of people you want to bring into your medical spa practice. Right.
People that love people.
Yeah. Who have a great aura, vibe about them. Too. Yeah. Charismatic even. And then there was two other values that you mentioned.
Oh yeah, the other two, relationships, goes hand in hand with experiences. So I'll combine those together. The other core strategy, because those were the 5 values, and then there's core 4 strategies. Is just connectivity, optimizing the follow-up, relationships, and experiences. So we already went through 3 of the 4. The other one I would just add is optimizing the follow-up and this is where a lot of money's lost, is millennials are going to call and they're going to be like, I'm not ready to come in yet. The key here is, are you trained over the phone? Are you trained how to ask for get them to come in for the consultation? Are you trained on getting contact information if they're not ready? And I cannot tell you how often I mystery shop practices, and it could be the kindest person in the entire world, but she's not trained to get my info. So then I call practice B on another street, in the same city, and they get my info. They follow up with me when I'm ready to come in. I go there, and they could have been a worse injector, a worse provider, a worse practice. But because they followed up with me, I go there. So it's a revenue, it's a profit leak, I would say. So you need to connect with them to drive them to your practice, and then you need to follow up with them. Like that, I feel like it's where the front desk is where a lot of money is lost. We don't want to be on the side where a lot of money is lost. So that's the other strategy I teach, which I go in depth to. There's no time for that for this one. But yeah, it's really just connecting with them. What do they engage with? You have to follow up with them, bring them in, and then create the best relationship and experience possible. If you do all of those things effectively, you will build a loyal millennial patient base in 2023 and beyond, no doubt.
Yes, and everybody they touch and have influence over, they will be to experience the same wonderful experience at the medical spa. Is there something that you've experienced that really stood out in terms of what a medical spa or an aesthetics practitioner was doing that was really special?
What's for me, it's just remembering little details.
Yeah. Oh,
so
right.
I've become friends. I have 2 providers now, but because I recently moved. And the thing that I love is they actually have become friends of mine. So I think it's the relationship, honestly. Like when you build a relationship with a millennial consumer, another practice will not be able to steal them away from you. I will gladly pay 30% more to stay with my provider. Like forget about it. I'm not changing. So it's really, for me, it's all about the relationship. And I speak for all millennials as well that have the same values I do. It's all about the relationship. You build that relationship, you provide that experience, of course, good results, but it's personal. It's a personal business.
Yes, and we could underscore that it is personal. A practice that knows so much of your own personal details in your life, and you're achieving a goal together, a plan for achieving the goal that the patient would like, that I would like, and having that authenticity, the caring and the remembering of.
That's all we hear about.
Yeah, it really feels feeling special, important, and loved.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any other things that you'd like to mention about this millennium?
Yeah, sure. I guess the one thing I didn't even touch on would be going back to the connectivity.
Yes.
I will say something I didn't touch on was we can go into social media for a minute, because I think that's something that we can definitely talk about. So
please.
And I recently actually just was in, I think, Connecticut 2 days ago, speaking at a Sinclair event on this exact topic. So when it comes to social media, I feel like it's a very intimidating topic. You're like, oh my gosh, there's all these platforms. What do I do? What do I focus on? When it comes to millennials, Instagram is going to be your bread and butter. People get consumed in TikTok, and that's great. Should you be on TikTok? Sure. But from a monetization standpoint, Instagram is still going to be your top platform. And the reason being, it is visual. Is TikTok visual too? Yes. But Instagram is more visual just because it's a more comprehensive platform and it's been around longer. So, and I will say, in terms of what to post, let's say, this is what practices get kind of confused on. Like, what am I going to post? I still see practices to this day that are paying thousands of dollars to a third-party social media company to post stock photos on their Instagram. Photos don't do anything. Like, that is not engaging in any way, shape, or form. People want to see people. Millennials want to see people. So when I talk to practices about this, and I have a whole hour course I teach on Instagram specifically for millennials, is post your providers, post your patients with consent. Of course, you need to be mindful of consents. Your providers, your patients, your practice, the people behind it. Like, who are you as a business? You're not your logo. Like, that's a part of your brand, sure. But who are you? You are your people. Like, that is the lifeblood of your practice, are your providers and your staff and your people. These are the people that if you rip them out of a practice, you want to have a practice. So showcase your people, showcase your patients. Like, that is what resonates with millennials. From an algorithm standpoint, right now it's really, really great to have a strategy around Instagram Reels, because they, as we all probably already know, and I apologize for this lighting, this hotel room is not flattering. Instagram came out with Reels to compete with TikTok. And the algorithm loves reels. Like now we know that when you go to Instagram, there's the reel feed, and it's the same thing as TikTok, basically. Focus on reels. I would post a reel every day. And I feel like people overcomplicate reels as well. Like it can be as easy as something that takes you 30 seconds to do, 3 minutes to do. It doesn't need to be this super complex thing that you spend an hour trying to perfect. And then you just stress yourself out and you get really disheartened. And then you're like, I'm not doing that again. Make it simple. If you don't know how to post a reel, there's YouTube. Create a reel, for dummies, not for dummies. But, we have so many resources that are free at our fingertips that we can take, an hour and go on YouTube and figure out how to do them, or just start playing around with it. I would also advise that hiring an in-house social media person will be one of your most powerful hires you could possibly do in your practice. And I think people are like, I don't have time to do social media and blah, blah, blah. And I understand that because social media is a full-time job. I totally agree with that. And something else I will add is people say social media is free. It's not free. Your time is not free. If you're a provider generating revenue for your business, your time is not free. Your time is money. So I don't agree with that. It's free. Is it a free platform? Yes. But to do the work, it's not, because you're either costing yourself time or you need to go hire someone. But I would advise hiring someone because you're the one that needs to generate doing treatments and procedures. You need to be the one in your practice doing that. So whether it's a first-time grad, whether it's an internship, Gen Z, young millennial who's hungry, savvy on social, whatever it may be, if you can bring someone in-house to do your social media, I would strongly, strongly encourage that. There will be an ROI on that employee, not from just a brand standpoint overall, but from a lead generation standpoint, educating your existing patient base. You can get creative with the compensation plans around it too, because it's a non-medical employee. So maybe there's bonus structures based on like leads they generate from their social efforts that make them more motivated in their role to be successful. But Instagram's going to be big. Showcase your people, have a strategy around reels, and just monitor the progress.
So, for instance, maybe have an interview with one of your people talking about practice.
Totally. Like showcase your providers, or like whatever your medical grade skincare lines are. Let's say you have Obagi and like Skin Medica, and like you have some of your like skincare experts or providers being like, these are my favorite skincare products. This is what I use every day. Like just fun things that you can do that. And the thing is, at first it might be like pulling teeth, but once you start getting your people involved and they start seeing your social media grow, it becomes like, oh, let's do more. So at first it could be a little bit difficult, but once you build that momentum, they're like, oh, this is awesome. Let's crank this thing. So it eventually becomes this, because is it a collaborative effort? Should someone be managing it and being like, okay, before we leave the practice today, we're going to do this reel, right? So should there be someone managing it? Yes, there needs to be that sole source person, coordinator, manager, director, whatever their title is, intern, managing, delegating the tasks. But it's still going to need to be a collaborative effort because all the providers should be showcased. So, but eventually it gets fun. And I will say that, exactly. Like it just, that it is what it is. And you can even go as further as some practices are very strange about allowing their injectors to have personal or Instagrams for their own. I personally don't think that you should be micromanaging. I don't think that creates the best culture. So I'm a fan of if you create, first of all, I'll add this, culture is big. That's a whole nother topic. If you create a phenomenal culture in your practice, you're going to not have to really worry about employee churn. So allowing your providers to still have their own Instagrams. They have their injector Instagram, their cool sculpting Instagram, whatever it is. And maybe you can do cool collaborations with them on social media and things like that. Like that stuff goes a long way and it creates excitement in all of these things. So I never advise practices to go down the route of micromanaging and making employees and injectors sign contracts saying you cannot have your own injector Instagram if you work for us. Like I'm not a fan of that. And maybe that's not, some people may disagree with me on that, but that from my experience and working with literally thousands of practices and knowing what has worked best, that is not the route I would advise you go down, because you will eventually lose that employee because it just leads to not the best culture.
Where there's, yes, but also there's the opportunity to increase the footprint. You have
exactly
the aesthetic practices footprint, and you have the provider's footprint to the energize around.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Yeah,
and people are part of a big culture, like a phenomenal culture that they love, and they feel like every day when they come to work, they're with people that are their best friends and their family, and they feel like they're all a part of something bigger than what their own individual role is. Like, yeah, you just may be an injector or the practice manager or the front desk coordinator, whatever it is. But when you build that culture and everyone comes to work and they're like, we're a part of something bigger.
Yes.
That is that's the level that you want to get at. And micromanaging is never the way to get there.
No, it never is. Don't allow personal freedoms to exist.
You need to have autonomy.
Yeah, flow freely. Absolutely. Yes. I love it. So that's big. Getting these tips on social media and posting. And do you have a calendar? Is a social media posting calendar something you recommend?
Yeah, I think calendars are great. I would advise practices use Canva as a really cool tool, and it's free. Mm-hmm. You can create your content calendars and things like that. Mm-hmm. I think it's easier if you kind of have whoever your person is that's going to do it. Creating a content calendar, for the most part, it just organizes everything better versus being completely on the fly. Obviously, can things be on the fly? Sure, especially when it comes to like Instagram stories. You're not going to plan those out. Those are just going to be like, let's post away all day long, because that has a very different purpose. But I think it's always great to be organized, have a content calendar, archive content. Maybe you even have like a day a month where you bring in a camera crew and you film content all day long, and you have all that archived for the next 60 days, let's say. So there's so many of my dear friends that own multi-location med spas. They dedicate like one day every 2 weeks, and they don't actually go in the practice. Like, they won't inject that whole day. They'll spend the whole day doing content, and then they just rack it up, and then the next day they're injecting all day long. But they spend one day every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, where they get their makeup done, or they get their makeup done themselves, whatever it is, whether they get it done or do it themselves, and they just film stuff all day long. And it's like, it might be annoying, and like, you're like, man, do I really want to do this? It's worth it at the end of the day, because it's like, now I have all this content in a library and in an archive that I can use for the rest of the month. So it's just an efficient use of time. And maybe it doesn't need to be a work day. If you're closed on Saturday, I mean, if I was a practice owner, I would go in on a Saturday with maybe some of my staff members, give them an extra bonus, whatever it is. And we're like, we're going to film all this content, whatever it is. Like,
and
just
what happens, create.
Yeah, exactly.
Have fun with it. And as for your patients, it's for your future patients too. Sharing yourself authentically like that, candidly, it's so refreshing.
Yes.
Gosh, I feel like there's so much more we could be talking about, and maybe in the future, if you don't mind, I'd love to have you back. This was so much fun. This, Audrey.
I appreciate the invite. I'm there at any time. I love stuff like this.
You're just such a pleasure. And
thank you.
Thank you for
likewise
coming back on in the future. Just let me know when you're available. We'll do it again, but we'll cover other topics too, because like your company, PatientNow, has a lot of offerings to it. We haven't even much about that, but that's something that maybe we can talk about the next visit.
Sure. Absolutely. Would be honored.
Oh, all right. Okay, so we'll have to say goodbye for now, but this conversation will be continued.
Fabulous. Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much, Nell. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, terrific. The pleasure was all mine. Really enjoyed you and all the items that you loaded in on us today. So much useful information too, and given in a joyful way. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye for now, and thank you for